Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Kachi. Thank you for the moderator for this amazing concept to put this class together. But I think today we are just going to go on an exciting journey into the world of intellectual property, often called IP. Now, of course, just a note of warning: do not be too deceived by the fact if you look at this organogram where you see the scope of intellectual property and then you see copyright and related rights standing on its own while industrial property has so many children. Copyright is as vast as industrial property is, and most times people get to wallow so much in what copyright and related rights has to do. In fact, just within copyright and related rights, you also have derivative, you have a gamut of a lot of things. But for the sake of today's class, we'll be looking at copyright and related rights. But I did a little tweak. I would touch more on IP adventure. Kachi's book has been so wonderful. Her new book, which is putting out there, which is children friendly, young students friendly. And the whole idea is to promote the essence of this book, and a lot of you, of course, should go get copies. And then we'll look at it from the angle of from ideas to ownership. So let's go back to that copyright and related rights. So generally, a lot of people, even people who are not who do not understand intellectual property at all, must have come across the word copyright. And usually when you ask people about the definition of what is copyright, you get to hear a lot of interesting definitions. A lot of them actually would make you laugh. But of course, they are only defining it from the perspective of what they understand copyright is all about. But for the sake of today's lesson, let us understand that copyright is the general term for the property and moral rights of persons to literary, artistic, and scientific work. Now, there are two designations when discussing copyright. The two keywords are fixation and originality. What do I mean? Copyright has to do with the original work of someone, which should be in a fixated format. It is not an idea. Ideas cannot be copyrighted. So far as something is falls within literary, artistic, broadcast works, audio visuals, those are fixated formats, and then they are the original product of one's idea. They are copyrighted, and copyright is concerned with protecting literary, artistic works. For us in Nigeria, the legislation in point is the Copyright Act of 2022, and it covers a large distinction of body of works, which includes writings, music, fine arts, sculpture, technology-based works, and interestingly, computer programs. While other jurisdictions may, patent softwares, in Nigeria here will copyright them. Now, copyright protects works that is the expression of thoughts and not just ideas, like I've mentioned earlier. So it means if something is in your head, so long as it's in your head, it is not copyrighted. If you and I, perchance, are thinking of the same thing, but I've put my thoughts in a fixated format, I would own the copyright to that idea, irrespective of the fact that you had an idea that looked similar to what I have done in that fixated format. And we've heard questions sometimes when talking about copyright about how people sometimes diabolically get ideas from people and they want to sue for copyright infringement. That doesn't happen. Now, the requirement, of course, I mentioned about originality, and of course, the right granted is exclusive right to use of work or authorize the use of work. Now, according to the Berne Convention, which is the WIPO treaty standard for the duration of copyright, it sets a benchmark of the lifetime of the author plus 50 years after their demise. What that means is that throughout the lifetime of whoever is a right holder in copyright, that copyright subsists until even 50 years after their death. Other jurisdictions have gone way ahead to have them up to 70, just like we do under Nigerian Copyright Act of 2022, whether other jurisdictions still maintain at 50. That's the benchmark. So any work that falls into the category that is listed as a copyrighted work last throughout the lifetime of the author, and 70 years after their demise. And it is interesting to note that copyright subsists automatically as against other industrial rights, especially patent and trademarks, where you have to take steps to want to apply to protect them. The same thing does not apply to copyright. It subsists automatically. However, some jurisdictions like that of Nigeria would actually encourage you to take steps to protect your copyright by registering such copyright with the Nigerian Copyright Commission and getting a certificate, just like you get your patent, certificate, or your trademark certificate. But of course, until most times you are reasonably bothered about the fact that you think your idea might become a product of infringement or will be stolen, of course, you are encouraged to take steps to register copyright. So that is it about copyright, I would like to say. But let's dial it back a little. We jumped into copyright, but when many people hear of the word property, it makes a lot of sense, especially for Black Africans. When you say property, what they think of is about land, houses, cars, or money. But of course, there is another kind of property that is just as valuable as those real estate or real properties you feel, you touch, you see, and the likes. Unlike intellectual property that deals with the product of the mind, what that means is that it's an intangible property. You cannot touch it, feel it, see it, taste it, maybe. But of course, your stories, your music, your drawings, your inventions, your business ideas, your logos, like Joy rightly mentioned when she was dealing with the issue of trademarks, your poems, your applications in your iOS or Android are all, of course, products of intellectual property. Now, these are creations of the mind, and the law recognizes that they can belong to the creator, the person who created them. And so what it means is that what we're looking at is all what we are telling you today is inspired by Kachi's book, IP Adventure Storybook. And it teaches us, as far as I'm concerned, that creativity is powerful, it's valuable, and it is worth protecting. Now, I expect that by the end of this session, I want each of you to understand something really important. You're not too young or too old to create something that is very valuable. Now, intellectual property generally would mean rights that are given to people over creations of the mind that are intangible or fixated formats. And generally, it rewards creativity and encourages innovation. Now, come to imagine this. A student writes a book, a beautiful storybook. Another student designs a beautiful school logo. Another one invents a cleaner cooking stove. Another person creates a mobile application to help students study. Now, all of this would qualify definitely as intellectual property. But of course, there are major types of IP, like Kachi had taken our mind back, where you have, when she mentioned, of course, the issue of copyright, which protects all the creative works that we've mentioned earlier. And so if you get to write an original poem or a short story, copyright protects it automatically as far as the Berne Convention, for which Nigeria is a signatory to, is concerned. Trademarks, on the other hand, protects names, logos, symbols, service marks, or product marks, like Joy also mentioned, which are used sometimes for business or for personal use. Examples, of course, she gave a plethora of examples, which of course all of us could relate to. Then for patent, what it does is that it protects new inventions that solve our everyday problems. Take, for instance, water filter devices are patented, farm tools, agricultural tools are patented, new machines, useful technologies, surgical instruments, or devices are all also protected. Then when you come to the issue of industrial design, it protects the appearance of products. And of course, examples in this respect would be shapes of bottles, the styles of our shoes, the packaging designs that we have all over. Then for trade secret, on the other hand, it protects confidential business information. And examples could be recipes. All of us like telling people about the stories of how our grandmothers knew how to prepare particular, very delicious soup that you can never find anywhere. And then some of us will go as far as say, Omo, if you chop my mama jollof rice, Omo, na die. Like nobody can cook that kind of jollof rice. Those are the kind of recipe we talk about. So it is only handed down from generations to generations and stuff like that. You also have formulas. And one of the popular formula you hear people talk about is the ingredients to make Coca-Cola, which you've heard has remained a trade secret from inception. You also have customer systems, algorithm systems, which sometimes are protected so that people do not get to know how they work. Now, but also, can we just look at what are the lessons for those of us who have been able to buy the book? If you've not bought the book, then too bad. Maybe it's time you need to get a copy. And the lessons you need to learn from this IP Adventure Storybook is that IP teaches lesson in every student, which they should remember. And some of the lessons, as far as I'm concerned, is that ideas have value. So sometimes students think creativity is just about what they play about, what they do jokingly. No, ideas can become careers, ideas could become businesses, ideas get to solve everyday problems we encounter in our lives. And also, we need to understand another lesson this storybook teaches is that creators deserve respect for their creation. So if someone writes a song or draws a beautiful picture or creates a complicated logo, it is wrong to steal it because respecting the creators builds fairness, it stimulates creativity and gives them the opportunity to do more. Now, another thing it teaches is that young people, irrespective of their age, can innovate. They can create a lot of good or inventions that will help humanities, help us in our societies. Many global inventions we've come to know worldwide started from young minds. So the deal is never underestimate your imagination, no matter how young you see yourself, whether you're young at heart or you're young in age. Then another lesson or takeaway from me would be that creativity can actually change societies or change communities. One good idea, just one good idea could improve health, could improve education, could improve farming, transport, or a means of communication. So another thing we should think about is how can students create IP? So when you now understand what intellectual property means, you need to now move from understanding to creation. Okay, our students, our young minds, or the ones under us, can generate IP, and they can generate it through the creation of copyrighted works like poems, songs, stories, dance routines, choreographies, videos, drawings, just name your pick. So how do they do this? By encouraging them to write regularly, to practice their music, to record their ideas. And then, of course, with the proliferation of devices all over, children now having access to iPads and stuff, they can easily do this. Also, our young minds can create trademarks, and they can do that through their club names, because one of the things we are discussing and pushing for is the creation of IP clubs in our respective schools. So naming their clubs, probably beginning with the names of our schools or with the names or whatever we choose to make it very catchy, make it, distinctive. Also, it's a way of creating trademark. And also, students could be taught that they can come up with catchy or creative names as far as they have businesses they want to sell or put up out there. Some of them have product brands, in as much as young as we see them to be, or through logos, things they want to be identified with, nicknames, catchy phrase or slogans. And well, for instance, a student starts a juice business and names it Fresh Bust, for instance, it's going to be a big deal for that person. Unknown to that person, it could be trademarked. So that name becomes a trademark as far as we are concerned. And they can also create inventions. if you look around you, there are a lot of problems that exist, and the creations of our mind sometimes push us to think about how to solve these problems. And some of these problems could include poor waste disposal, water shortage that we've come to see, study difficulties, energy problems, security issues, which we are going through currently all over the country. Now, ask your students, can they create solutions to any of this? And you'll be surprised at the answers they give you. That is how inventors think. And then you could also have them, especially those who are fashionistas, interested in fashions, designs, art, engineering. They could come up with some shoe designs, uniform concepts that you have, even your schools adapt, bag styles, furniture ideas, packaging designs. It's so interesting sometimes when you get to pick their minds. So now that they can create this thing, how do they protect them? They keep records, write dates, save drafts, keep a record of what they do. Of course, they should also put their names on their work. They write a poem or a short story or music, they have their names on it. Then, of course, the whole idea is avoid public disclosure too early, especially inventions, until you've taken steps to disclose such inventions at the point of registering or patenting them, for instance. Also, they need to learn how our registration systems work. And these are ideas we need to teach them. So some rights, like copyright, arise automatically, like I mentioned earlier, while some need you to take steps to register them depending on, of course, again, the jurisdictions or the country concerned. But above all, we should always encourage our young ones to seek guardians from teachers, from lawyers, from IP professionals, because we have, for instance, patent attorneys who may necessarily, in most jurisdictions, not even be lawyers, or relevant agencies like the Patent and Designs Registry or the Trademark Registry or the Copyright Commission, for instance. In Nigeria, students may later interact. Of course, the World Intellectual Property Organization's Nigeria office is also there at the United Nations House for them to go for learning excursions where they see materials, and then they visit other places like NOTAP that deals with telling them more about intellectual property rights. So for those who are doing the trainings today, I would ask rather that how can schools, looking at this new wonderful book that is out, how can they, help students? Now, the role of schools are several, but of course, if we break it down, we would have the fact where schools can create mentorship, where teachers would guide students to show talent in some of these areas, like in writing, in sciences, coding, music, business designs. Or, of course, they could, in another way, provide resources to support creativity through the libraries, art rooms, science labs, internet access, computers, music tools. All those are also good. And then competitions once in a while should be made to have the students, healthy competitions, writing contests to have them, compete healthily against one another to share ideas and help themselves, stimulate more of what they do. Then finally, we should also encourage them in the establishment of intellectual property clubs. And what they will do, these IP clubs, if we eventually and successfully have them registered in school, is that they can teach our students or young minds how to protect ideas, how to brand their businesses or build them, how to innovate and to innovate ethically, teach them responsibility and how to commercialize their talent, as well as building their confidence and teamwork. Then, of course, we should not forget to always celebrate them by recognizing them publicly, giving them commendations. This also inspire future greatness and innovations and thinking. Then think of this in our lecture for today. Probably someone would give testimonies, we hear in stories how people say, I started singing while in school, or I started writing in notebooks, or I started coding, became a programmer at a very young age, or I became an inventor looking at a local problem I wanted to solve at a young age. Every expert at what they do was once a beginner. They didn't just wake up and get there. So you may be sitting beside the next great author or mentoring one, as the case may be. And perhaps, of course, it may even be those of you who are listening to these lectures. So before I leave, because I'm being warned that I have just 2 minutes more, I want to leave you with these questions for you to ponder about. What problems around me do I think need solving? What talents do I have or do I want to groom as a mentor or being a mentee? What can I create this month or this year if this month is too small? And then what ideas do I think can become valuable tomorrow? So do not forget that your mind is a factory, your imagination is an asset, and your creativity is power. Do not wait to grow old before you create value. So let's start with ourselves and then encourage the young ones to do that. Thank you so much, Kachi, for this opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for listening.